As participants continue to make their way to the seats, I would like to officially welcome you to this 2019 Commonwealth Association of Technical Universities and Polytechnics in Africa International Conference on the theme of building partnerships for the promotion of TVET for innovation, entrepreneurship, and youth employment in Africa. My name is Novella Nikwigizina. I'll be your host this morning. And I hope and believe that this is going to be an interesting and interactive session to discuss and set the scene on how to enhance and develop the TVET sector. According to the World Bank, 10 million young people, young Africans, come to the labor market, often poorly skilled, and the labor market might not be able to absorb them, and sometimes does not find in them the right skills. Of course, this is not only a challenge, but an opportunity for the TVET sector to develop, because the TVET can help develop the skills that are key for employability, but also self-employability, to help give these young people a brighter future. Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Honorable Minister of Education, Training and Innovation, the Republic of Namibia, Excellence Ministre des Enseignements du Niger, Honorable Minister of Education, Science and Technology from Tanzania, representatives from the government of Rwanda Polytechnic, of government institutions, CAPA Secretary General and Secretariat and members, heads and representatives of polytechnic and technical universities from Africa, and the youth that is present, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, good morning. This is my pleasure this morning to ask the person that is going to offer us the welcome remarks, Dr. James Gashumba, in his capacity of the Vice Chancellor of Rwanda Polytechnic, to come and officially welcome and start this session. Thank you. With your round of applause.
Good morning, everybody. Bonjour. Hamjambo. Mwaramutse. Okay. As Novella mentioned, I'm James Gashumba. I'm the Vice Chancellor of Rwanda Polytechnic, which is an amalgamation of 8 public polytechnics in Rwanda. My duty is not to give a speech, but to welcome you to Rwanda, those of you who are from outside. And I think we have representatives from probably over 20 countries. I'll not go around saying, Kenya stand up, Tanzania stand up, but I know that there are people from over 20 countries. So those of you who are not Rwandans, welcome to Rwanda, the country of 1,000 hills. Some of you may have started counting. Around Kigali alone, maybe we have like 30 hills. Some of them are big enough to be called mountains. So welcome. In Rwanda, if for the visitors, if you put out your hand to greet someone, they hug you, please don't be surprised. We hug a lot in Rwanda. We hug people, so don't think we are crazy people. It's just cultural. We hug people to show them that we love them and we welcome them to our country. Now, I have to give a sense of serenity to show that everything is under control. I want to recognize people who are together with us at Rwanda Polytechnic. We've been working to put this conference together, but there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes. And Madam Secretary General of CAPA, who is here with us, just stand so people can recognize you. Yeah, she and her team, and also a team from Rwanda Convention Bureau, they are the people who've been working really very hard. And Engineer Diogene Murinda Habi at the back was the chairperson of the local organizing committee. They are the ones working hard. As we talk, they are connecting and liaising with each other, with Minister's office, with Prime Minister's office. So I must come here and show you that everything is under control. But actually, there's a lot of things happening. So I want to recognize them and to thank them. I want to say one or two things. That we are grateful for the people who accepted our invitations. We were expecting 8 or 9 ministers, but some of them, at the last moment, either had to send other delegations because they went to Japan. Many ministers of education are in Japan at the moment. But those of you who are here, you are most welcome, and we are looking forward to interacting with you, getting to know more about you. So, as Novella said, Minister from Namibia, Minister from Niger, Minister from Tanzania, and there is a minister who is arriving a bit late, Honorable Mohamed Reras from Morocco, but he'll be coming a bit late. I want also to recognize people we are on this journey together, the development partners. I can see several of them here. I won't call them out their names. Thank you for being here. We are working together in the TVET sector to build a TVET sector that is very, very strong. Our permanent secretary will be elaborating on this, but Rwanda has deliberately and intentionally said they want to invest in TVET, in technical and vocational education and training, realizing that TVET is a cornerstone, is a driver for economic development, especially for industrialization in Africa. So our permanent secretary will elaborate more on this, and I'm really proud to see that our minister, our Ministry of Education, and other ministers, they are very much behind the effort of TVET, of actually we call it rebranding TVET, so that youngsters, parents, and their young people can be attracted, not forced, but attracted to TVET, to work. What we used to call the dirty work. No, not the dirty work, the cool, dirty work, but which brings in a lot of money, which will make them rich. So I want to just make those remarks and invite Novella back to the podium and say again, murakaza neza, murakoze.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gashumba, for these words of welcome, but also of appreciation. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome the members of the panel that will help unpack what we think or what we talk about when we talk about building partnerships for, be it innovation, employability, and my voice is not small, but I'm not sure that I would be able to do without the mic. So, and for entrepreneurship and youth employment, I would like to call to the stage the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Mr. Samuel Mulindwa. I would also like to welcome Mr. Tom Mulati, the Director of TVET. the Director of TVET in the Ministry of Education in Kenya, as he's representing Dr. Kevit Desai, Principal Secretary of State of the State Department of Vocational and Educational and Technical Education, TVET, in Mineduc. Thank you very much. I would also like to welcome Dr. Lawali Cole. Dr. Lawali Cole is the Executive Director of the Coalition on Media and Education for Development in Africa Forum. And of course, we also want to welcome on the stage Mr. Arshford Ngugi, who's the Regional Coordinator for Eastern and Southern Africa of GIZ. Very interesting to talk about technology and innovation, and hopefully the youth that are in the sector will help address some of the havocs that we're having with our technical equipment today. I would like to start with you, Mr. Mulati. Of course, what we're discussing and what we're talking about today is how do we go forward? Many countries have identified the TVET as a key catalyzer, not only for youth employment, but also to address poverty and to develop the country as a whole. I know that your country in particular has really gone forward in some of the sectors, including the embedding innovation and new technologies as we talk about the fourth industrial revolution. I would like to really ask you to share your experience after the implementation of the TVET Act and the TVET policies. What has been some of the key elements that can facilitate the innovation to be embedded in the TVET development?
I want to start by saying that in Kenya, the TVET education system is well set for the development of the next decade and beyond. And our youth are actively engaged in practical skills training. And beyond the practical skills training, we have a lot of emphasis on innovation among the trainees so that we can be able to address the challenges that face our society at the moment. And innovation is so organized in a manner that we do encourage all our TVET institutions to focus on innovation. We do hold regional and national competitions where the youth are actively engaged. And we are even moving further to reach out to the entrepreneurs and all other private players so that we can be able to enhance commercialization of the innovations which are so developed by the youth that we train. So we are quite on track, and we know that TVET is the way to go to solve the societal problems and to be able to address all the challenges that the youth are required to face. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to bring it to you, Mr. Mulindwa. Rwanda has implemented its TVET policies since 2008. 11 years down the line, what have been some of the key maybe achievements or lessons learned from the implementation, and especially in the case of involving the private sector and the different mechanisms that have been put in place to make sure that this is indeed a success?
Thank you, moderator. TVET is a new subsector, I would say, in Rwanda, because if you compare with other subsectors, you know, they've been there since time immemorial. And the first thing the government did was the establishment of a policy, very strong institutional arrangements to follow the TVET. But number two, and the most important, was the serious government commitment towards investment in TVET. Government has invested enormously in the development of infrastructure and equipment in those respective facilities, to the extent that today, even public universities and other universities come to make utilization of the state-of-art high-tech workshops that are within the TVET facilities. And moving forward, definitely, government has also given prioritization in the sponsorship of TVET programs. In Rwanda, for students, they tend to pay back the part of the contribution government gives. However, for TVET, it has a preferential treatment. They pay 50% of the cost. And by so doing, it attracted some smart brains to come in TVET. Actually, today, some of the public universities, initially in the olden days, you know, people wanted to go to Eiffel Towers, universities, the smartest brains in science, in STEM. But today, we have some of the smartest apply to go for TVET. It's an experience that has been built in the last decade. And remember, initially, it used to be thought as a profession for those who have failed academically, and that perception has totally changed to the extent that some of our public universities now get some, I would call them, students that have not been taken by the Polytechnic because the smartest have applied to the Polytechnic. The reason is simple, because you realize that the employment opportunities have been much more for those who have opted to go for technical vocational training, whereby around 75%, as per the Treasury studies show, get jobs in their first 6 months after graduation. And I think that has been, you know, a pull factor for the students and even the parents to strongly encourage their children to apply for technical vocational training within our country. And in addition to that, government also encouraged the private sector, because for construction in the initial years, it has now been depleted. In the initial years, we encouraged the private investors through construction, where we put up a facility, a loan facility where they would pay 60% and 40% was a subsidy. And in addition to that, we gave them tax-free, so there were tax incentives for the equipment. So, and actually because of that, today, 61% of technical vocational schools are privately owned. Government, we have less. But why was it possible in such a short period of time? It was those deliberate strategies that government established to encourage private sector investment within the technical vocational. And of course, moving forward, we've had a very good working relationship with the private sector itself. And actually, on every other step, we move together. Be it curriculum development, they are actively engaged to establish what is required on the labor market, because definitely they know what they want. And in the process of curriculum development, they've been actively engaged, and we move together. Finally, we have a very strong multi-sectoral coordination arrangement for skills development in TVET. TVET is not only for education, because education is not the only consumer of the services that are being produced by TVET. So we are on the supply side, we have those in the demand side. But in addition to that, there are a number of sectors that require the output of TVET. So we've established a very strong multi-sectoral arrangement that helps the coordination and ensuring the delivery of some of these initiatives. I think I can stop there for now. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. I think it's interesting to have the experience of Rwanda, and of course, probably we should congratulate Dr. Gashumba that now has the most brilliant students in Rwanda Polytechnic. And I would like probably to come back to that question of the private sector and the private sector engagement. And of course, we know that agriculture remains one of the key sector contributing to the GDP, but also in terms of employment. And we know that we've been talking about agribusiness as one of the key elements or one of the key area in which the youth should be or could be more engaged. And I know that GIZ has done several initiatives in that regard. So how, in your sense, how does agricultural TVET how can it be developed and to what purpose?
Thank you. Allow me to, first of all, thanks for the opportunity. Allow me to also maybe add one more information is that apart from working in GIZ, working in German Development Corporation, this has been an initiative of the African Union and GDC, German Development Corporation, in several countries in Africa. And on the other hand, my role is I sit in the Development Agency of African Union, AUDA NEPAD, as an advisor on skills development. And the drive towards, before I come to agriculture, is we are looking at, in African continent, responding to Agenda 2063, which, just to repeat a bit of what we talked about yesterday, in the Youth Forum. This is the Africa's blueprint for transformation in Africa. A bit of statistics. 2015, we had a population in Africa of 1.5 billion people. 2050, we expect to be 2.5 billion. That means by 2030, we'll have 440 million young men and women who will be looking for jobs. And what does it mean if you have 440 million people looking for jobs? If you do the maths, clearly among all the countries in Africa and which sectors, where can we absorb these people? And what does it mean if you have these 440 million idle youth? So one of the responses and one of the initiatives that we have worked on is looking at which are among these sectors that are productive and can absorb the youth. We always talk about, are we going to be the pet of the next fourth industrial revolution? And there was this joke that said, yeah, there was the first industrial revolution, some continents participated, we had the second and third. And Africa, are we going to be part of the fourth industrial revolution, or are we going to count it? And we say, yeah, there was the fourth industrial revolution. We also talk about agriculture, and it's only understood as mainly on the farming side, but we have a bit more in agriculture which can offer jobs and skills. There's a big potential there, and this is the area where German Development Corporation has been working with the AU programs in different programs, Skills Initiative for Africa, Agriculture TVET, and it revolves around improving the policy, the policy framework. We have several national development plans, but investments in agriculture is usually minimum. If you look at the political landscape, agriculture takes time before you are able to see the results, to reap the benefits. So usually we go for the quick wins where the voters will easily see infrastructure development. But if you look at our experiences along the value chain, we have demonstrated, we have tools and instruments that have demonstrated that it's not only in production, and it's not only in the unattractive sectors, especially with regard to the youth, like the production. We also have trade, we have transportation, we have ICT, we have digitization. These are areas where youth also would be interested in. And we have had experiences in several countries, including Rwanda. We have also worked with several training institutions and now coming back to private sector development where they supported the different member states in terms of reforming the agriculture TVET, in terms of having competency-based occupation standards and curricula that respond to the needs of the private sector. And I would also maybe like to share that we have worked with and have had over 10,000 young women and youth who have been skilled and who are earning, from or living on their livelihoods from agriculture. So, well, there's a lot more I can talk and talk again, but I think I'd also like to refer to what we had yesterday in terms of the youth. And we always say youth, the future. But the message which we should bring now is that we already have these tools and instruments. We already have good practices. The previous speakers have talked about it. So the future is now, and we should start implementing. And as sitting within African Union Development Agency, AUD and NEPAD, is that we'd like to offer these solutions so that we are able to drive our continent forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and for sharing the experience of the NEPAD, but also in your institution. I would like to bring you in, Dr. Cole. And we know that the TVET, similarly than education sector in Africa, has been sometimes, quite often, actually facing some challenges in terms of coordination, in terms of organization and management. And I know that, of course, we are learning by doing sometimes, including in TVET sector in the countries. So for you, and I know that you have worked on some of those issues, including the leadership issues, what are some of the key elements or some of the key factors that can enhance the competitiveness of the TVET or the strengthening of the TVET organization?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity that CAPA has given me and the rest of you also. Well, what I can say here is that we have many challenges when it comes to TVET. Number one, TVET has been neglected by many African governments for a very long time. I mean, since we got our independence, it is only after the 1990s that attention has been, accorded to the importance of TVET by many governments. And also, the private sector hasn't come in the way that it should be expected to come in, because the private sector needs a lot of skilled young people, a lot of skilled experts in various areas, in the areas of science, technology, and other innovations. But then it's only now that we see that. Let me also commend Rwanda for taking the lead in this, because I don't think there are many countries in Africa that have been so advanced in TVET as Rwanda is right now. And I think we need to learn from the example of Rwanda. The leadership factor is extremely important in the area of TVET, because once, we have no sense of direction in institutions where leadership is not, quite coherent, and we don't have guidance. We don't see TVET, taking the shape that it should take in Africa. We can benefit the young people. As all of you have said here in this panel, we now have the youth bulge. Right now, we can say that over 70% of African populations are under 35 years old. And many of them are unskilled. Many of them have gone to school, but the education is almost useless, because they cannot be employed, they are not employable, and they're looking in the streets, and they have academic degrees, some of them, and they cannot do much. So that's why leadership comes in. I'm talking from leadership, from the leadership of a country, leadership in ministries, leadership in industries, leadership in other sectors also. As we know, TVET is not only geared to one sector alone. TVET is multidimensional. There are different areas that we can talk about TVET, and that includes even life skills, critical thinking, and other vocations also. It's not only using your hands to, to produce something, but also using your head, your brain, and everything else. All that is part of TVET. So there needs to be some kind of coherence and some kind of leadership and a sense of direction when it comes to TVET. And the education sector is extremely important indeed here. Because when we talk about education, we're only thinking about book learning, about going to university, getting degrees, and so on. But as some of you have said, and as the moderator has just pointed out, we see the question of agriculture also, agro-business, which is coming up in Africa. And this seems to be neglected by many of our institutions, by our government, et cetera, and even those of us who are working in these sectors. I am within the African Union Commission. We're heading a partnership organization called CAFO, which is a Coalition on Media and Education for Development Africa Forum. And there we are thinking about, we are focusing on young people, particularly young people. And what we want to do is, we want to go back to the school system, look back at the curriculum, look back at the leadership within the school system, look about leadership in the education sector, and see what can we do to support, the changes that are imminent now in Africa. Africa needs to change. We cannot just do business as usual, because business as usual did not take us anywhere on the continent. We are still back to square one. And today, where is it that when you go to South Korea, you go to Japan, you go to Germany, it's a developed country, and you find that things are totally different. South Korea's GDP and GDP of Ghana and Botswana were the same in 1960. But look at Ghana today and look at South Korea today where they are. It's because of TVET. South Korea did very, very well in those areas. And now they are developing technologies of different types, they're exporting technology, and even China is doing the same thing. China is even coming to Africa to teach us or to explore or to exploit, whichever way we take it. But there are so many different things that are happening today on the continent. And that we are still sleeping. We are still sleeping. I mean, I went to school in Tanzania many, many years ago when President Julius Nyerere was president. And I remember one day he came to the campus to tell us something. He said that while those people over there are flying, we are still crawling. And I think we are still crawling. So let's follow the example of Rwanda. Let's start running. Let's start flying. And let's take TVET more and more seriously, because that's what we need on the continent today. We don't need academic book learning anyway. I mean, there are so many people with PhDs all over the continent, but what are they doing? Some of them are lagging behind in the United States, and other countries are doing nothing. And we need them here. Why do we have all these young people who have to cross the high seas to go to Europe and sometimes get drowned or become slaves in Libya? Because they lack those skills. If those people had TVET skills and we had proper leadership in our continent to take care of these people, I don't think any African young man or young woman would want to go to Europe to become a street cleaner or to clean toilets in hotels. I don't think anybody want to do that. We will stay in our continent, we will work here, we will develop our continent, and maybe because of our numbers, we could even go further than Europeans and Asians are doing today. So maybe, I don't know whether I should stop here for now.
Yes,
and then
definitely. I think the message is clear enough. Yeah. We have to stop doing business as usual to see real change. Thank you very much. And at this point, and because of time that has been quite a scarce resource this morning, I would like to bring it to the floor right away. And because the objective of this session, again, is really to highlight some of the key messages that can be, or spark the conversation that can be continued throughout the conference. So I would like to ask anyone that might have a question, a comment, an input to ask to the panelists to please raise your hand up, introduce yourself, and please ask a question for no longer than 30 seconds, please. Thank you very much. And of course, we're hoping that the technical team will help us with the mics.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is James Chepkonga from Nairobi. And my question goes to Ashford, Ngugi, and Mulate. I didn't want to thank you for articulating the aspect of agriculture and the collaboration between Tibet and private sector in the development of the curricula. My question though is, while we are trying to implement CBC or competency-based curricula, the problem is it's kind of stuck in the education institutions. It's not going down to the grassroots. For example, we are asking youth to engage in agriculture and agribusiness. However, down there, we don't have like extension officers. We don't have people with expertise
What is the
in
question
taking care of
exactly?
that. So my question is, how do you scale down that to the grassroots so that that is going to be able to help the youth and help the people to develop that agriculture and map it down the agricultural chain so that it's not just about the books and having the knowledge about it, but it is actually practical.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We had another one, in a lady just there in the back. Just yes.
Morning, everyone. My name is Concepta. I'm coming from Malawi. My question goes to, I've just forgotten the name, but from Rwanda. You've been talking about the private sector. I would have loved if you could elaborate more how the arrangements are, like those effective arrangements that are working for the engagement of the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's switch to this side and start with the Honorable Minister. Yes.
Hello, good morning. Oh, okay, sorry.
Just a second. Yes.
Thank you indeed, Madam Moderator. Indeed, TVET is the tool and the vehicle we have in Africa to move forward our industrialization agenda. But as smaller nations, some of us, the challenge we have with TVET, and I think my question goes to the peers from Rwanda, it has to do with work-based learning. That is, we know that TVET is almost 70% practicals and maybe 30% theory. Now, in terms of smaller countries with small industries, how do we deal with the work-based learning exposure? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The person that has the mic.
Hello, good morning. I'm Engineer Dr. Osman Kalamu, Rector of Federal Polytechnic, Damaturu, Nigeria. First of all, let me commend the presenters by sharing their experience and activity with us here. My questions goes to the Permanent Secretary of Rwanda. That is on the enhancement of TVET. You are talking of giving out free or interest-free to private sector. I believe whenever you give out, let's say, interest-free, I know you are doing it in order to enhance Tibet education. But at the same time, we know that you are at the same time reducing the income to the government. So my question here is that, what are the conditions that will lead down to this private investment? Why I say this is that some people, they may use that opportunity to take it. At the same time, they're not going to use it where they are supposed to use it, but rather they will take the equipment or they will take the equipment outside and send it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, and who was the question addressed to?
Rwanda.
Thank you.
Yes.
So you're Rwanda for the panel. I would like to go in the back. All the way in the back to the person that is standing. Thank you. You do not have to come to the front.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Joseph Babidele Bolaniwa from Lagos State Polytechnic, Nigeria. My question could be answered by any of the presenters. The issue of attitudinal change has been a big problem, especially in Nigeria. there's this complex, the apathy between the universities and the polytechnics. I don't know what happens, what is applicable in your countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we'll have to stop here for the questions. And again, I like very much to see the hands up because that means that we have been able to eventually spark the conversation, but the objective is not to finish the conversation today, otherwise you would go home and the conference would be ending. But the objective is really to ensure that we have the conversation going. So please keep those questions for the next sessions as well. In the meantime, we're going to respond in just a few minutes with the panel. Please take no more than 1 or 2 minutes to respond to the questions so that we may go also and usher into the next session. There was a first question on the competency-based curricula that was asked to both yourself and Mr. Mulati, and how to bring it down to the youth and make sure that they are able to also participate in agricultural value chain. I'll give it to you first.
Yeah, thank you. Youth in agriculture, or say agriculture in general, we have this narrative always. When you are in school, when you started school, when you were failing in school, what were you being told? If you can't make it, go home and be a farmer. So, I mean, that's where the narrative should start changing, the social branding. And I'll commend, without going into details, the last question. It's about the attitude. What kind of attitude and what kind of examples have we given to the youth? And do we have good entrepreneurs, agripreneurs in agriculture or even in other sectors that are unattractive but potentially have the ability to give us the numbers and the jobs? The other thing is looking at commitment and hard work. The soft skills it was talked about, I think Mr. Mulati mentioned, is as much as we are also trying to skill the youth and everybody in the different sectors, is that the soft skills, which includes communication, facilitation, entrepreneurship, agripreneurship, also have to go hand in hand with the process. We, based on the different experiences, I may not be able to give all of them, is one of the strategies that we have been using is to have examples of successful people who have made it in agriculture, showcasing their examples. We'll also have a stand outside where we'll have young women agripreneurs who are already making it in agriculture, and this is the narrative that we want to carry through. Mm-hmm. The other thing is looking at the private sector engagement. Private sector is no longer a client, but a part and parcel of the stakeholders in this multi-sectoral approach to ensure that we create jobs, we produce people who are either entrepreneurs, employers, or employable. Last but not least, I also wanted to add on to the countries. At African Union Development Agency level, we are also partnering and trying to work towards a common Africa continental codification framework. What does that mean is as much as we are opening our borders in terms of trade, in terms of transport, is that we should also open our borders in terms of skills so that the different countries can feed on each other. Some countries have the resources, they have the industries, other countries have the human capital, and then we could have this cross-sectoral arrangement where people, in terms of skills development, can be employed anywhere on the continent.
Thank you very much. And this also reminds that the AU indeed ratified the continental strategy for TVET. So it has been taken at highest level, but maybe we need more strength in implementation. I would like to bring it to you, Mr. Mulati, and I know that Kenya, in terms of competency-based training framework, has really made it a point and a center of the TVET strategy. So how do you bring it down to the youth, be it in agriculture, but also in other sectors as well, in just a few minutes?
How we bring it down to the youth in the development of agriculture as agribusiness in Kenya is that we focus on the two phases of agriculture. That is the productivity aspect of it, which the competence-based curriculum is really addressing. And we have also developed occupational standards for all the activities that go on in agriculture. And in that way, the youth that we produce are of high productivity in the sector of agriculture. But for agriculture to be more lucrative, then you need also to address the aspect of value addition. And that is why in Kenya we have already equipped 23 technical colleges with value addition training equipment so that we can focus on the second phase of agriculture. So when there is productivity and there is value addition to the items that are being produced in the agribusiness, then eventually the price will be high and the demand will be high and the sector will be attractive.
Thank you very much. And we had a number of questions coming to Rwanda as you are representing the country on the panel. We had first the arrangements that have been put in place in terms of engaging the private sector. We also had the minister from Namibia who asked about the web-based learning, but also on how do we develop and how do we catalyze probably private investment. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. How do we make the engagements? I think it all starts at policy formulation. We don't leave behind the private sector in the policy formulation. For example, the workplace learning policy, which is a key and critical policy for the TVET development, we jointly work together with the private sector and with their respective different chambers. There was high-level engagement of all the different chambers to get buy-in. And of course, within the policy, we clearly stipulate clear roles and responsibilities of the different key players. And when it is set right from the start, then the rules of engagements are clear. And of course, when we go into the process of the implementation, you know, there is something we had agreed earlier on, and we continue with it. But number two, education, we're on the side of the supply of the skills. But the private sector is on the demand side. And of course, we need to reconcile what the demand needs from the supply. Therefore, you cannot leave them behind because definitely they are the end users of the skills that we develop. So being the end users of the skills that we develop, we need to know what do they want. And of course, they cannot be out of the equation because they are actively part of it. So in so being, we realize that it cannot work out unless those joint efforts are brought together. And I think we thank actually the private sector here. They are very responsive. And actually, we have an excellent working relationship. I'm seeing the CEO of the private federation here, and I believe a number of the private sector chambers are also here present. And we have an excellent working relationship. So number two, of course, in the best interest of time, the question from the Honourable Minister of the work-based learning. Indeed, as developing countries, definitely we have challenges of industries. You know, our industrial sector is not highly developed. But there are other innovative approaches we can use. Because I just give an example. There are skills you can learn not necessarily from industry, but from other projects that are existing. Government has so many different projects where skills for construction, welding, name it. You know, people need to improve the skill. So we make use of the few private sector industries we have, but we also make use of our own different projects that we do have. And actually, in light of that, we take our students to some of these different projects. And they also acquire a skill, they improve a skill. We closely work with different sectoral ministries that are having developmental projects, and in most of those development projects, you realize there is learning that can take place. We take the instructors who have the experience, but of course, even the learners are given the privilege. And in light of that, we have established what we call production units in all our TVET schools. And actually, those production units are two-edged. One, they help the student in acquiring the skill in those different projects because they offer labor. But on the other hand, they also provide an opportunity for income generation of those respective schools. And of course, those resources are plowed back for buying consumables, because definitely we cannot say that we provide all what is sufficient. So I think the struggle continues. But where there is goodwill, especially with the private sector, we make utilization, effective utilization of what we have. But we also, for some skills where we don't have the industry, for a few skills, we also make arrangements to send some of our students where they are, most likely in some of our neighboring countries. I remember some students used to be sent to Kenya where, you know, a specific skill, we don't have it, and a specific industry is not highly advanced. We could make such partnerships, or even some other partner countries. And I think that has been working like that. And I would like to take this opportunity as well to thank our development partners who have been so supportive. Of course, with effective utilization of the resources given to us, strong accountability, there is very strong responsiveness from our development partners who keep on supporting us in this journey. I think we've not moved alone in this journey. It has been, you know, a joint effort, private sector, government, private development partners that have supported us, and of course built the trust because of efficient utilization of the resources we are giving. So there is very strong accountability of every penny invested into these initiatives. Finally, to the question from my brother from Nigeria, I think we don't simply offer a tax incentive for anyone. You have to show clear evidence that the facilities are there. And definitely, we do very close follow-up that what you're bringing is related. We have lists in different skill sets of equipment and facilities in all these different areas. So when we get that, the customs, you know, they need clearance from the Ministry of Education with evidence that this is relevant to the specific areas of study. So, and in addition to that, we have very strong regulatory framework. Our institutions, from time to time, check what is happening. And remember, if you don't make use of it, we might close the institution as well, because not fit for purpose. So with our legislation, we also follow you up. If you bring it and take it elsewhere, then next time, the institution might close because you don't have the requisite facilities to be running. So I think with such initiatives, definitely they are on their toes to knowing that, okay, someone is following it up, and I ought not to waste it. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you very much, and thank you for really bringing in the essence of the partnership that we're talking about with mentioning really how we work with the different institutions. And I would like to give you, Dr. Cole, the last word as we are wrapping up the discussion. And it was a question on attitudinal change, bringing it back to how do we make TVET more attractive. Elements of responses have already been given, but I would like to give you the floor to really talk to that question and to wrap up the discussion. Thank you.
Well, I would say that we need to change attitudes right now. As the saying goes, necessity is a mother of invention. And actually, TVET is absolutely necessary today as we speak. Because there are so many challenges in the world today. We have the youth bulge, as mentioned earlier. There are also many opportunities that are coming up also. And then we have seen that not everybody who goes to school or who has achieved academic excellence is employable. So therefore, we need to change this attitude. There need to be a lot of advocacy. What we have been doing at the African Union is that we have a number of policy instruments. We have, first of all, the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. We all know about that. We have Agenda 2063, which has been mentioned here. We also have this TISA, Science, Technology, Innovation Strategy for Africa. And we have the TVET strategy also, the continental strategy for TVET. You see, what is happening is that we, at the level of the AU and its partners, of which we are one of them, is that we must do a lot of advocacy work, and we must change people's mindset. We must change people's attitude, because even though we're not doing, even if we don't do it properly right now, it's absolutely necessary, because you cannot have a child who does 16, 17 years of schooling, goes to university, and comes out and is not employable. So therefore, we need to develop those skills, which we have neglected for a long time, and which will contribute to economic and social development. So therefore, the attitudes have to be there. Therefore, we need to encourage the polytechnics, universities, vocational technical training institutions, and other institutions that are dealing with TVET. We need to work with them closely. And we need to encourage our young people also to, to undertake studies in science, technology, innovations, also focusing on technical and vocational education and training, on TVET. That is absolutely important. It's a necessity right now as we speak.
Indeed.
And this is where the employment opportunities will come. This is where people can get the basic education. They can be involved in agricultural, TVET, and other areas. So we need to work on that. And as I speak to you right now, we are working very closely with the African Union to ensure that there's a lot of advocacy work that we do to ensure that these things are better understood, that TVET is not meant for those people who didn't make it academically, who have failed their O-levels or their A-levels, couldn't go to university. It's not meant for that. In Germany today, I was in Germany last year, and I went to visit some schools there. In Germany today, some of the best, brains are in TVET. They don't go to do academic studies, history, literature, or other things, but they are in TVET today. Mm-hmm. And that's why you have the industries in Europe so well developed. Mm-hmm. And we need that in Africa today. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the panelists for addressing the questions. But I'm also told that the discussion is so interesting that you are given some additional time to share a little bit more. And I would like to also acknowledge the presence and the entrance of the Minister of Youth from the Republic of Rwanda, as well as the delegation that has been with her, and Professor Dalichako from Tanzania. You're welcome. And we are, of course, discussing on how do we ensure that TVET as a sector, but also as an opportunity, can actually be enhanced, and how do we leverage all the different opportunities that are there, including in involving and introducing and embedding ICT innovation, how do we engage the private sector, and how do we really enhance the competitiveness of the sector. I know that we had a number of questions that we had muted in the previous session, so if you still have your question and it hasn't been addressed, please raise your hand. We'll start on this side this time.
Oh, good morning all. Thank you, Madam Moderator. My question is addressed to Mr. Cole. For Africa to progress in, by the way, I'm Hassan from Kenya. My question is, for Africa to progress in TVET, it must have a dream. And the dream must be in a form of, clear policy on one, the policy itself, two, system of evaluation of the execution of the policy, three, on how to share, the achievements across Africa. Is there what are you doing to ensure that that's achieved? Thank you.
Thank you. Still on this side.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Sozioma, GTTI Gambia.
It's more of a comment than a question. I listen with a lot of interest the contributions and narrative that are given by these distinguished panelists. And I have observed since I arrived here 3 or 4 days ago the immense progress that Rwanda has demonstrated, meaning that Rwanda has provided a very good case study for what we're about to do here. So what I'm commenting on is, especially from the AU, that there should be continent-wide frameworks. I was very glad to hear you mention something like a common Africa qualification framework. There should be a continent-wide framework that will be compelling for member states of AU across the continent, different institutions, something that they will look onto, well-regulated and monitored, that will provide a framework for delivery of TVET, so that practices that we find in Rwanda, practices that we find in other parts of the continent, can trickle down to other countries that haven't practiced them, and gradually, in so doing, we turn around the practices across the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's get to this side.
My name is Efua Nkrumah. I'm from Ghana. First of all, I want to congratulate you for the good work done. The second thing is an observation. I think that all those seated there are men, except you who is going
Last
about
time I checked, yes.
Yeah. And I also want to ask, women in technical education are already experiencing a lot of challenges. Throughout the discussion, I've not heard anything about the direction towards which the AU and the other partners are taking women in technical education. So I want to know what plans are there so that in the future, even in your panel, we'll find a woman, and then there will be much focus on women in such discussions, because we are in the majority. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I do believe that Mr. Ngugi had talked about the agricultural TVET for women project, but also I know that Rwanda has made it a national priority to increase the number of women in TVET, but probably they can elaborate a little bit on that as well. I would like to come to this side in front. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm in the person of Solomon Asiktagwa, President of Syrian Representative Council, Takrady Technical University. I think my Dr. Efua has spoken well, also from Ghana. I'm from Ghana. I also have this issue. You know, everything is driven by governance. Can we as Africans also have our governance having a policy direction in such a way that with that particular policy, we can follow it? Because sometimes you have a political party comes and they have their own ideology. They may change the terrain. They go a different way. So if we can have something like that so that we can always follow that by following the technical education. Because in Ghana, we have changed even we have 8 technical universities, 2 polytechnics, and I happen to be the chairman of all the technical universities, the SIC president. I realized something. When you even go to the technical university, even when they have a project, maybe they have a construction or anything, they rather go to look for a contractor to come and do this with people outside. Why don't we use the students so that they can gain the experience to be able to exploit, to do a lot? Another thing I realized is that when you go to the technical university, instead of we placing more premium on the technical education, you see other courses are coming in, even taking over of that technical education or that of the technical side. Thank you very much. So what can we do? And I like the Rwanda lesson that they have to give about part of, a chunk of the education that will give it or have a partnership with the private sector. If we can also learn that as African countries to help us. Thank you very much.
So to whom was the question addressed to?
It's a comment.
It's more like a...
left and then the Rwanda minister. Thank you.
Well, it's a comment that turned into a question to 2 people.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Thomas Ngala. I'm from Kenya, and I'm addressing this question to the TV representative from Kenya. We are talking about competent graduate come 2022 in Kenya. And we are glad that now we have the TVET programs because it's the one that equips students or graduates with the skills that is required in the job market. but we still have to do a lot. My question is, how is the relationship between the TVET officials and the public sector in terms of employment? Because you are training TVET graduates, but the people who are training us, some of them, they don't have the skills to train us in TVET. How is the relationship? Because now the current employment in Kenya, right now we are seeing that the advertisement was that if you have a degree, you can come and teach somebody for a diploma without undergoing the pedagogy. How can you make it that to make sure that we have the competent graduates come 2022? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll have to stop there for the second session of the questions. We'll come back. I see a very insistent hand.
Yeah.
I give you 30 seconds.
I have a mic here.
Oh, well.
All right. Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Richard Kambinda. I come from Namibia. And just two quick comments just to make, and then one question. One comment, the issue of equality was discussed yesterday. And I hear women raising their voices, why they are not involved in TVET. I think we are all equal. That's number one. But maybe the element we must bring in is the issue of equity, where women are then brought to the forward. They are brought to the fore. Of the long queue of men coming into TVET, women must actually be led to the front to enter. Maybe that would be the way we can balance the people in TVET, men and women. The second comment I want to bring in is the comment.
We will probably have to stop there, but
Okay.
you can ask the question.
The question,
in just
all right, okay.
10 seconds.
Question. I think the question, Namibia is only about 28 years of independence, and I know of so many countries in Africa who are much older than that. Now the question is, why are we still canvassing for TVET? Why is it still we have this negative perception on TVET? Why is it like that? Why are we still campaigning for TVET? We should already by now have moved along. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would like to give probably just 1 second, 30 seconds each probably to address some of the questions. Just one question and then we can wrap up.
Yes. Just a few points. I hope I'll manage in the 30 seconds. I saw the question of, women in the panel coming, and wanted to comment on it. But I go straight into the Dream for Africa. Dream of Africa is espoused in the Agenda 2063. We talked on it. And specifically for our topic today, it's in one of the it's aspiration number 6 among the 7 aspirations in Agenda 2063, which talks about having Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential of African people, especially women, youth, and also caring for children. So there's a blueprint for Africa, and I would like to encourage all of us to familiarize ourselves. We may not go into the details for now, but at the level of African Union, Dr. Lawrence will comment on it, and African Union Development Agency, this is the agenda we are following, and all the member states have ascribed to it, and this is the support that we require from the different member countries. Mm-hmm. Specifically, women in agriculture. We have worked in several countries. I may not mention it, there are more than 15 countries. And one of the approaches that we're trying to use is to go beyond gender mainstreaming. And we have this approach called gender transformative approach. Gender transformative approach means you're talking about reaching benefit, and beyond benefit, it's empower. So he talked about equity and equality, but it's equity, equality, and then transformation. We are not going to achieve the objectives, we are not going to empower women if we are only going to talk about equity and equality, if we are only going to talk about reaching and benefit, but we have to go beyond that. We have to go to socio-cultural, socio-economic attitudes and processes, so that we bring a transformation in the way we do things. This has worked in some of the countries, and we would also like to encourage you to, come to go around the different exhibitions, and some of the experiences will be shared with you, and we journey together this journey of transformation of
Thank
Africa.
you very
Thank
much.
you. Yep.
The Permanent Secretary.
Thank you very much. In respect to the gender aspect, I think in Rwanda we have a deliberate strategy for gender parity for TVET exclusively. Actually, within our sector strategy, we have very specific targets year in, year out. Currently, we stand at, in TVET, we stand at 43.7% female within TVET. And of course, our target is to, reach gender parity in this sub-area. And another initiative, especially for some of the young girls who tend to be vulnerable, are the adolescent girls who quite often get early pregnancies. We have what we call Adolescent Girls Initiative, where we get girls who have dropped out of school because of early pregnancies. We integrate them and have a deliberate package for them to come back through technical vocational and get a skill so that they could be economically empowered. So there is that deliberate strategy. And finally, I would like to make a comment from someone who raised an issue about the attitude. There is something, attitude change, something which is simple. If you've gone for university education and you spend 3-5 years without any employment, and evidence, research shows that, in our tracer studies, we can easily bring on board those who have gone through TVET. The choice is yours. Actually, to us, we have an experience. Of recent, I think, we introduced a reconversion program for graduates who would like to get short-term training courses in TVET. And we were overwhelmed by the turn-up. We could only manage, we had vacancies. When you compare the applicants, we could only manage to absorb 10% of the applicants. But that was evidence that our youngsters are clearly very much aware that TVET is the way to go. These were graduates who had been unemployed for a number of years. And they knew that a short-term course, 3 to 6 months in technical vocational, is going to give you an opportunity. So they applied. And actually, we were challenged because our capacity was 10% of the applicants. We wish we would have been able to absorb all of them. So change is happening in the course of the way, and there is an acknowledgement that TVET is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In just a few seconds, Mr. Mulita.
I'd like to comment about competence-based education and training in Kenya. And with respect to what has just been asked about the trainers, we focus mainly when we are recruiting on the skills. The aspect of pedagogy can come before or after, and therefore we are focused on the skill, and once the skill is identified, we recruit that person. If the person has the pedagogy, that is okay. If the person doesn't have pedagogy, then as a government, it is our role to ensure that they undertake the relevant pedagogy that can assist them in the delivery. I'll also comment on attitude. I'd like to say that in Kenya, the attitude for TVET is quite high, and it is all emanates from the political will that we have right from the government, the president, all the way, the leaders from the top downwards that are talking about TVET. And we also take deliberate steps as a ministry to ensure that there is adequate publicity in the media concerning the prospects and the achievements of graduates from our TVET institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kwol?
Yes, I think Mr. Hassan here asked a question about policies and how do you ensure, that they are achieved. As I said earlier, there are so many policies on the ground. Africa has been very, very good at planning. I mean, since independence, 1960s, 1970s, we had so many plans. If I should go back to the Lagos Plan of Action, other plans and so on. but we are very, very bad at implementing them. And that is why today the African Union and other bodies have realized that. I'm happy that our colleague here from AUDA, the African Union Development Agency, is here. And certainly they are all looking into all these things. And the African Union also is working with us, other organizations which they are hosting like ours, to look into all these policy instruments. As I mentioned earlier, we have Agenda 2063, which has been mentioned. There are all these policy issues there, and on TVET and other issues. We have the Science, Technology, and Innovation Strategy for Africa, TISA. We have the TVET strategy. Also, we have the Continuing Education Strategy for Africa, CESA. We have all these right now. These are the 4 key ones now we have African Union is working on. But then the problem now is that if I go to any country in Africa, even including here, and I ask people about some of these instruments, some of these policy agendas, people don't know about them. And that's a major problem. That's a major issue. And that's where we have all these attitudinal problems also with TVET and other areas also. Indeed. So we need to do more advocacy work. We need to communicate and communicate and communicate more and more and more on these issues. Okay.
Thank you very much, and I would like to ask you really to help me congratulate and thank the panelists for the very insightful points. And I think what we have to understand is that in some of those sectors related to TVET, we really need this paradigm shift. We really need to enhance the quality of what we're offering, but also create the needed partnerships with academia, with the private sector, and with all other partners that can help really make sure that we are able to achieve the goals. And I'm also told that beyond the simple appreciation, we would like to also offer an appreciation token to the panelists. May the appreciation token come forth. Maybe the token will be given. The token will be given by the Secretary General of CAPA to really thank you for the contribution and interesting insights that you're offering to this discussion.
Thank you very much, Chair. Welcome to honorable ministers present here and distinguished personalities. It is my honor and pleasure to give token of appreciation to our distinguished guest speakers. Thank you. Honorable Permanent Secretary Mulindwa Samuel, please accept this on behalf of the CAPA Executive Board and the Secretariat.
Thank you very much.
Director TVET, Republic of Kenya, Mr. Tom Mulati, please accept this token of appreciation on our behalf. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Dr. Lawali Cole, CAFO from Addis Ababa, it is my pleasure to extend this token of appreciation on behalf of CAPA. Thank you very much, sir. Our own Ashford, GIZ card, thank you for the patronage.
That's all. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you again to our panelists. With a round of applause. Thank you very much. I would like to just provide a couple of announcements before we get to the next session. The first announcement is that the All Talent and Innovation Competition teams, you know yourself, please report to room AD10 for briefing. You can see Erastus at the back for directions. Then I would like to ask all of us to remain in the room as we wait for our guest of honor that should be here in the next few minutes. Please do not leave the room, and we'll start the next session right away. Thank you very much.